The calloused hands of a struggling single mother rested on the billionaire's legs. For 11 years, every top doctor had said those legs were gone forever. But Imani Toussaint touched his spine and whispered, "No, they're still fighting." That night, Julian Marchand's toe moved, but that tiny movement was not what terrified his family. What terrified them came weeks later, when Julian locked his wheelchair, gripped his cane, and stood up in the middle of a shareholder meeting. Beside him stood Imani, a black woman in worn-out scrubs, the woman they had called a fraud. She had no idea her healing hands had just uncovered a $8 billion secret. 3 weeks before Julian Marchand stood up in front of his family, Imani Toussaint was standing barefoot in her kitchen at 4:38 in the morning, sewing a blue cloth pouch under the weak yellow light above her stove. The pouch was small enough to fit inside a child's palm. It had been washed so many times, the fabric had gone soft at the corners. One side was patched with white thread. The other side had a tiny tear near the zipper, where a 9-year-old boy had tried to hide the damage with school glue because he knew his mother had already paid for medicine that week. Inside the pouch was Malik's rescue inhaler. Beside the inhaler was a folded square of notebook paper with 3 words written in Malik's careful handwriting. Morning, bus, night. That was his system. He had made it himself without telling her. A 9-year-old boy should not need a system for breathing. But Malik Toussaint had learned early that grown-up fear had a sound. It sounded like his mother opening bills at the kitchen table and staying quiet too long. It sounded like the click of her phone when she checked her bank balance and turned the screen face down. It sounded like her saying, "I'm just tired, baby," when both of them knew tired was not the whole truth. So Malik made lists. He lined up his pill bottles with the labels facing forward. He wrote times on paper. He shook his inhaler near his ear to guess how much was left. He counted the seconds when his chest tightened and only called for his mother when the number scared him. He was not trying to be brave. Children do not call it bravery when they start protecting their parents. They call it helping. Imani pulled the needle through the blue fabric and bit the thread with her teeth. Her hands were broad at the palms and narrow at the wrists, with short nails, cracked knuckles, and a thin scar across the base of her left thumb from the year she worked double shifts, sterilizing therapy equipment with hospital-grade disinfectant. Those hands had lifted men twice her size from treatment tables. They had loosened frozen shoulders. They had pressed warmth back into fingers stiff from factory work. They had held Malik upright through nights when his lungs sounded too small for his body. And now those same hands were sewing a cheap pouch because a new one cost $12. And $12 was not $12 in Imani's life. $12 was 2 bus passes. It was a bottle of children's fever reducer. It was rice, beans, onions, and 1 pack of chicken thighs if she bought them near closing time. It was the difference between almost making it and not making it at all. She tied the final knot, smoothed the pouch flat, and whispered the sentence her grandmother had given her before Imani was old enough to understand why she would need it. A hand that heals should never be afraid of power. Her grandmother's name was Solange Baptiste. In Cap Hayed, Solange had been the woman people came to when doctors were too expensive, too far away, or too tired to listen. She was not a doctor. She never claimed to be. She sold fruit in the morning, cleaned houses in the afternoon, and in the evenings she sat on a wooden stool outside her front door with a bowl of warm oil beside her knee, while fishermen, market women, church ladies, dock workers, and exhausted mothers lined up quietly in the fading light. She knew where pain hid. That was what Imani remembered most. Not the words, the listening. Solange listened with her ears when people spoke. Then she listened with her hands when they stopped. She would touch her wrist and say, "This is not your wrist hurting. This is your shoulder asking for mercy." She would press the back of a man's knee and say, "Your body remembers the fall even if your mouth says you forgot." She would rub circles into a woman's palm until the woman started crying, and then Solange would keep rubbing. Not surprised, not embarrassed, not asking questions the woman was not ready to answer. Pain had a language. Solange believed most people stayed sick because nobody had the patience to translate. Imani came to America when she was 11. Her mother, Nadej, arrived first, cleaning rooms at a French Quarter hotel where tourists left wet towels on marble floors and called it hospitality. 2 years later, after enough money had been saved and enough paperwork had been signed, Imani joined her in New Orleans with one suitcase, 3 dresses, and a photograph of Solange tucked into a school Bible. New Orleans never felt like Kappa Haitian, but it had echoes. The damp heat, the music coming from open doors, the smell of food traveling before the person carrying it. The way people made family out of neighbors because rent was too high, and life was too heavy for blood relatives to carry alone. Imani learned English in public school. She learned New Orleans by bus route. She learned America by watching her mother smile at people who looked through her. By 26, Imani had a license in therapeutic massage, 2 semesters of community college anatomy, and a job as a rehab aide at St. Nee. Agnes Community Rehab on the edge of New Orleans East. St. Agnes was not the kind of place wealthy people entered unless they were donating money or filming a campaign video. The carpet near the front desk had a permanent brown path worn through the center from years of patience, dragging tired feet toward second chances. The waiting room chairs were mismatched. The air conditioner made a rattling sound every 12 minutes. The therapy bands hung from a metal rack by color. Half of them stretched past their proper resistance, because replacing them meant choosing between bands and printer ink. But people came. Bus drivers with lower backs, ruined by years of sitting. Hotel housekeepers with wrists swollen from lifting mattresses. Line cooks with burns healing under sleeves. Elderly women after strokes. Warehousemen after falls they had not reported because missing work meant missing rent. They came because St. Agnes took payment plans. They came because Imani remembered their names. They came because when she put her hands on them, she did not treat them like broken machinery. She treated them like bodies that had been asked to survive too much. Her official title was rehab aide. Her paycheck said $19.40 an hour. Her patients called her Miss Imani. The old men called her baby, until the first time she made them do another set of assisted squats, and then they called her ma'am. She was 34 years old. She had 1 son, no husband, no savings, no car, and a gift she did not talk about because poor women with gifts learn early that the world either exploits them or mocks them. Malik was 8 when the breathing got worse. He had always been small for his age, with serious eyes and long fingers that made every pencil look important. Sickle cell had lived inside his blood since birth, but for years Imani had managed it the way mothers manage things they cannot cure. Appointments, medication, water bottles, warm socks, no running too hard and cold air, no ignoring fever, no sleeping too far from the sound of his breathing. Then came the winter infection that settled in his chest and refused to leave cleanly. After that, Malik's lungs changed. Some mornings he woke with a whistle in his breath so faint, only Imani heard it. Some nights he sat on the edge of the bed with his shoulders lifted, trying to make more room inside his ribs. The doctors were kind when they had time. The nurses were kinder when they were not drowning. The insurance company was neither. They approved the cheap treatments. They denied the stronger machine. They covered one medication, questioned the second, delayed the third, and sent letters written in clean language that turned a child's oxygen into a case number. Imani kept every denial in a folder beneath the kitchen sink because the apartment had no desk. The folder was blue too, like the pouch. Blue became the color of breathing in their home. Blue pouch, blue folder, blue plastic spacer, blue light on the old nebulizer when it worked. That morning, after she finished sewing, Imani walked into Malik's room. He was asleep on his side, one hand under his cheek, the other curled near the blue pouch on the pillow beside him. The nebulizer sat on a milk crate by the bed. A glass of water stood beside it. His school uniform shirt hung over the back of a chair, already buttoned because he liked to save time in the morning. On his desk, beneath the library book about planets, was another list. Do not forget inhaler. Do not make mom late. Ask Miss Ruthie if the printer works. Imani read the second line twice. Do not make mom late. Something in her chest tightened so hard she had to put one hand against the doorframe. She wanted to wake him and tell him he was not responsible for her time, not responsible for her rent, not responsible for the bus schedule or the insurance letters, or the way her face looked when she thought he was not watching. Instead, she crossed the room quietly and placed the repaired pouch beside his backpack. Then she bent and kissed the space above his eyebrow. Malik opened his eyes just a little. "Did I wake you?" she whispered. He shook his head. "You fixed it?" "I fixed it. I fixed it." "How much did it cost?" The question came out soft, half asleep, and it hurt more because he did not know it should not have been his first question. "Nothing," Imani said. "Just thread." He nodded, relieved. Then, because he was still a child somewhere beneath all that carefulness, he pulled the pouch closer and closed his eyes again. At 6:10, they left the apartment. The hallway smelled like bleach, old rain, and someone frying onions downstairs. Imani locked the door twice because the top lock stuck if she did not pull the handle toward her. Malik waited with his backpack straps held in both hands. He did not rush her. He never rushed her on rent week. Outside New Orleans was already damp and awake. A delivery truck hissed past the curb. Somewhere down the block, a man was singing to himself while sweeping the front of a corner store. The sky was the pale gray blue of early morning before the heat turned everything heavy. They walked 8 minutes to Bell's Wash and Fold, the laundromat Miss Ruthie Bell owned, with her late husband's name still painted on the front window in gold letters. Miss Ruthie was 62, built soft and strong, with silver braids pinned at the back of her head and reading glasses. She wore on a chain even when she was not reading. She opened at 6 every morning because she said working people deserved clean uniforms before rich people deserved brunch. The laundromat smelled like detergent, warm cotton, coffee, and the peppermint candies she kept in a chipped bowl by the register. "Morning, Toussaint," Miss Ruthie called when the bell over the door jingled. "Morning, Miss Ruthie," Malik said. He went straight to the small folding table near the back, where Miss Ruthie let him do homework before school. There was always a chair waiting for him. There was always a cup of water. There was always a granola bar placed beside the napkin, like it had arrived there by accident. Imani had tried to pay for those granola bars once. Miss Ruthie had looked offended. "Girl, don't insult me before sunrise." Since then, Imani pretended not to notice, and Miss Ruthie pretended she was not feeding the boy. That was how dignity survived between people who did not have extra. They helped sideways, never from above. Miss Ruthie poured coffee into a paper cup and handed it to Imani. "You look like the knight picked a fight with you and won." The knight had backup. Bills. Bills always bring cousins. Miss Ruthie made a sound in the back of her throat. Then she looked past Imani toward Malik, who was taking his inhaler out of the blue pouch, and checking it with the seriousness of a pharmacist. "He been tight again?" "A little." "How little?" Imani did not answer right away. Miss Ruthie understood silence. She had raised 3 boys, buried 1 husband, survived Hurricane Katrina on the roof of a neighbor's house, and rebuilt a laundromat with insurance money that arrived late and not enough. She knew all the shapes silence could take. She lowered her voice. "You know what my mama used to say?" "What?" "When the pot is empty, don't stare at the pot." Knock on the neighbor's door. Imani looked away. "I'm tired of knocking." "I know. I'm tired of needing." "I know that too." Miss Ruthie slid a folded $20 bill under the coffee cup. Imani saw it immediately. Her face changed. "No, I didn't offer." "Miss Ruthie, I dropped something. Maybe you found it. Maybe the Lord has poor aim." Despite herself, Imani almost smiled. Then she pushed the bill back. "I can't." Miss Ruthie's eyes softened, but her voice stayed firm. "You can. You just don't like the feeling of being caught human." That sentence stayed with Imani all the way to the bus stop. Being caught human. Not weak, not failed. Human. She stood beside Malik beneath the scratched plastic shelter while buses sighed and groaned along the street. Malik leaned against her side. Not heavily, just enough for her to know he was tired. She placed her hand on the back of his neck, and felt the heat there, the thinness, the pulse. "You good?" He nodded. "You sure?" "I'm breathing okay." "Okay," was Malik's favorite lie. Not because he was dishonest, because okay was the smallest word he could use to protect her. She wanted to tell him never to lie for her comfort. She wanted to tell him childhood was supposed to be loud, selfish, messy, full of wants that did not apologize for existing. She wanted to tell him to ask for the expensive cereal, to complain about the bus, to cry when needles hurt, to be 9 without checking the price of everything. But the bus arrived, and the morning moved, and survival did not pause for speeches. She dropped Malik at school at 7:22. He hugged her quickly because fourth graders were walking past, and he had begun to care who saw. Then he turned back. "Mom." "Yeah, baby? If the insurance people call, tell them I don't need the new machine right away." Imani froze. Malik adjusted the strap of his backpack. "The old one still works if we hit the side." The way he said it broke something cleanly inside her. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet break in a place that had been bending too long. She crouched in front of him and took his face in both hands. "You listen to me. Grown people are going to figure out grown things. Your job is school, planets, fractions, and beating me at Uno. I was just saying, I know what you were doing." He looked down, she lifted his chin. "You do not make yourself smaller so the world feels lighter on me." His eyes shone, but he did not cry. Malik almost never cried. That was another thing Imani hated and admired at the same time. He nodded once. Then he went inside. Imani stayed by the gate until the doors closed behind him. At St. Agnes, the day began before she was ready. Room 3 needed new sheets. Mr. Alvarez's hip was stiff from sleeping wrong. Mrs. Henry refused to use the walker because she said walkers were for old people, and she was only 78. A hotel housekeeper named Patrice came in, with both wrists wrapped in elastic bandages, and still apologized for being late because the bus broke down. Imani moved from body to body, pain to pain, adjusting, pressing, lifting, listening. She did not heal people in the way stories use that word. She did not wave her hands over suffering and make it vanish. She worked. She watched how a shoulder guarded itself before a patient admitted fear. She noticed when scar tissue pulled one way and breath pulled another. She saw the tiny betrayals the body made after injury. All the places it chose. Protection over movement. At noon, during her lunch break, she ate half a peanut butter sandwich while filling out an appeal form for Malik's respiratory equipment. The form asked for policy number, diagnosis code, provider signature, medical necessity. It did not ask what a mother heard at 2 in the morning when her child tried not to cough too loudly. It did not ask how many times she had sat upright in bed counting breaths. It did not ask what it did to a boy to learn the cost of staying alive. At 2:46, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it ring because she was helping Mrs. Henry stand. At 2:51, it rang again. At 3:05, a voicemail appeared. Imani listened to it in the supply closet with a stack of clean towels pressed against her hip. "Ms. Toussaint, this is Dana from Gulfstar Benefits calling about your appeal for Malik Toussaint. After review, the requested respiratory support device has been denied as not medically necessary under the current plan guidelines. You may submit a secondary appeal within 30 days. The message continued, but Imani stopped hearing it. Not medically necessary. Her son's breath had been placed on one side of a scale and found inconvenient. She stood in the closet while the fluorescent light flickered overhead. For 1 full minute, she let herself feel nothing. Then she wiped her face even though she had not cried, put the phone in her pocket, picked up the towels, and went back to work. That evening, after her shift, she took one private client in the back room because private clients paid cash and cash bought medicine faster than appeals did. The man was a dock worker with a shoulder injury and no insurance. He had been told by an urgent care doctor to rest for 2 weeks. He laughed when he said it. Rest was advice for people with refrigerators full enough to wait. Imani worked on his shoulder for 40 minutes. At the end, he lifted his arm above his head for the first time in 6 months. He stared at his own hand like it belonged to somebody else. "How did you do that?" he whispered. Imani washed her hands in the small sink. "I listened." He left $60 on the table, even though she had charged 40. She tried to give the extra back. He shook his head. "My wife said if you fix me, don't come home cheap." When he was gone, Imani sat alone in the treatment room with the $60 in her hand and the denial voicemail still burning in her pocket. Outside, rain started tapping against the window. Soft at first, then harder. New Orleans rain had a way of arriving like it owned the street. She looked down at her hands, calloused, tired. Good hands. Hands that had learned from Solange. Hands that had held Malik's blue pouch under kitchen light. Hands that could find pain in strangers and name it before they could. And for the first time that day, Imani whispered the sentence again. A hand that heals should never be afraid of power. She did not know why she said it then. Maybe because she needed to hear her grandmother's voice. Maybe because the room felt too small for the size of her fear. Maybe because somewhere across the city, in a Garden District mansion behind iron gates and live oaks dripping with rain, a man worth $3.8 billion was being told by his doctor that nothing in his body could change. Imani did not know his name yet. She did not know about Julian Marchand. She did not know about the family waiting for him to disappear inside his own diagnosis. She did not know about the woman named Miriam Cole, who had been standing in the hallway that afternoon, watching Imani help a dock worker lift his arm, watching those hands do what expensive specialists had failed to do. Imani only knew that Malik needed a machine. Rent was due in 9 days. Her account held $18.73, and tomorrow morning, no matter how tired she was, she would wake before sunrise, check the blue pouch, count her son's breaths, and put her hands back to work. Because that was what Imani Toussaint did. She healed other people in a world that had not yet decided whether her own child was worth saving. Across the city, behind iron gates and live oaks that bent over the street like old men keeping secrets, Julian Marchand sat in a room built for a king and felt less alive than the paintings on the walls. The Marchand house stood in the Garden District. 3 stories of white columns, black shutters, gas lanterns, and money old enough to pretend it was taste. Tour buses slowed in front of it sometimes. Guides pointed through the windows and told strangers that the Marchand family had shaped New Orleans hospitality for 4 generations. They mentioned the riverfront hotels. They mentioned the private clubs. They mentioned the Marchand Meridian resorts stretching from Louisiana to Florida. Places where wealthy people paid $800 a night to sleep on linen soft enough to make ordinary life feel rude. They did not mention the locked medical wing behind the East Gallery. They did not mention the custom carbon fiber wheelchair that cost $48,000 and moved so quietly over marble that servants learned to fear silence. They did not mention the man inside it. Julian Marchand was 49 years old. On paper, he was still chairman and majority voting member of Marchand Meridian Resorts and Riverfront Holdings, a private hospitality empire valued at $3.8 billion. His signature still moved banks. His name still opened rooms. His portrait still hung in the lobby of every Marchand property, always from the same angle. Shoulders square, face composed, eyes sharp enough to make investors sit straighter. But portraits are merciful. They do not show what happens after the photographer leaves. They do not show the pill organizer beside the bed. They do not show the calf muscles gone thin beneath custom trousers. They do not show a man gripping the arms of his chair in an empty hallway because a spasm has lit his spine on fire, and he refuses to let anyone hear him breathe through it. Julian had been handsome once in the careless way rich men are handsome when they assume the world will keep polishing them forever. Now his face had become something harder. Still striking, still controlled, but carved down by pain. His hair was black with silver at the temples. His jaw stayed clean-shaven because he refused to let disability make him look neglected. His shirts were tailored in London. His watch was a Patek Philippe. His father had worn the day Julian took over the company. His shoes were Italian leather, polished every morning by a valet, though they had not touched a sidewalk in 11 years. That was the cruelty nobody named. The world kept dressing him like a man who could leave. Every morning, Miriam Cole entered his suite at 7. She knocked twice, waited 3 seconds, then came in whether he answered or not. She had been a nurse for 31 years before Julian hired her away from hospital administration and gave her the official title of private care director. Miriam did not call him sir unless lawyers were present. She did not flinch when he snapped. She did not praise him for doing ordinary things. That was why he had kept her. Storms coming in by noon, she said that morning, opening the curtains. Gray light spilled across the room. Beyond the glass, the garden glistened with last night's rain. Julian looked toward the windows, but not at the garden. He rarely looked at anything too long anymore. Beauty had become another room he could not enter. Cancel the weather, he said. Miriam did not smile. I'll put in the request. She crossed to the side table and checked the bottles lined up there. Anti-inflammatory, muscle relaxer, nerve pain medication, sleep aid, medication for the stomach damage caused by the other medication. A kingdom of amber plastic. Dr. Pierce Harlan called it management. Julian called it a leash. Harlan had been Julian's private physician for 9 years. Tall, silver-haired, expensive, with the bedside manner of a man who knew rich patients preferred certainty over honesty. He visited 3 times a week. He reviewed scans. He adjusted doses. He said the same words in different combinations. Permanent damage. Degenerative response. Risk of further trauma. Manage expectations. No meaningful recovery pathway. Julian had heard those words so often, they had become part of the furniture. 11 years earlier, no one had used words like permanent. They had used words like lucky. Lucky to be alive. Lucky the fracture had not climbed higher. Lucky the balcony had collapsed inward instead of toward the street. Lucky the young housekeeper had survived because Julian had shoved her out of the way before the iron railing gave. That was how it happened. Not in a car crash. Not in some reckless rich man's accident. In a storm. At the Meridian St. Charles, the crown jewel of the Marchand family, the hotel had been hosting a hurricane relief fundraiser 3 months after a brutal storm had torn through the lower parishes. Donors drank champagne beneath chandeliers while local families stood outside the service entrance waiting for leftover food in foil pans. Julian remembered that detail more clearly than anything else, the gap between the ballroom and the alley. The violin music inside. The wet shoes outside. He had been 38 then, newly in control of the company after his father's stroke. Ambitious. Impatient. Still foolish enough to believe that expanding an empire and serving a city were the same thing, if you said the right words. At press conferences, he was walking the second-floor gallery with a city councilman when he heard the crack. A sound like a tree splitting. Then, a scream. A young housekeeper named Talia Price had stepped onto the service balcony to pull in a stack of wet linens. The balcony had been flagged for repair 6 months earlier. The report had crossed 3 desks. It had not reached Julian's. Or maybe it had, and been buried beneath 100 other urgent things. That question had followed him into every sleepless night since. He lunged before he thought. His hands hit Talia's shoulders. He shoved her backward through the open doorway. She fell inside. The balcony dropped. Julian went with it. 2 floors. Iron. Brick. Rainwater. A white flash of pain so complete it erased the world. When he woke, 3 days had passed. His legs were still there. He could see them beneath the hospital sheet. That was the first mercy and the first lie. Because seeing a thing does not mean it belongs to you. The first year after the accident was a parade of specialists. Neurosurgeons from Boston, spinal researchers from Zurich, a rehabilitation team from California, a pain expert from London. Every one of them arrived with confidence packed neatly beside their instruments. Every one of them left quieter than they came. There had been surgery, then another. Then a third procedure that promised to relieve pressure but left him with deeper pain and less control. There had been electrical stimulation, hydrotherapy, experimental injections, a robotic walking frame that made him feel like a corpse being puppeted for wealthy optimism. When hope became embarrassing, the specialists changed their language. Recovery became stability. Stability became management. Management became acceptance. By the 5th year, Julian stopped asking if he would walk again. By the 7th, other people stopped pretending he might. By the 9th, Dr. Treeb Harlan began writing phrases in the chart that sounded medical but felt like a burial. Functionally non-ambulatory, unlikely to regain voluntary lower limb control, permanent mobility dependence. Julian read the chart once, only once, then he told Miriam never to leave medical files where he could reach them. That was the year Julian Marchand stopped waiting. Elliot was Julian's cousin, though he used the word brother when cameras were near. He was 2 years younger, charming in public, restless in private, the kind of man who believed loyalty was a costume people wore until a better outfit appeared. As COO, Elliot handled resort operations, investor relationships, and family board politics. He was good at all three because he understood that most people did not need to be convinced of a lie. They only needed the lie to arrive in a suit. For years, Elliot had played the devoted relative. He pushed Julian's chair at public events when photographers were present. He placed a gentle hand on Julian's shoulder during interviews. He told reporters that his cousin remained the mind and soul of the company. Then he walked into boardrooms and said Julian was tired. Julian needed rest. Julian's condition made long-term planning difficult. The family had to think responsibly, always responsibly. That was how betrayal sounded when it had been edited by lawyers. Julian knew Elliot wanted the chair, not the wheelchair, the other chair, the one at the head of the table. But knowing a man wants your crown is not the same thing as proving he is stealing it. The Marchand family trust was complicated by design. Julian held controlling authority as long as he was medically competent and physically able to execute his duties. If 2 physicians and a supermajority of family voting members certified permanent incapacity, operational control could shift to Elliot, 61%. That was the number Miriam hated. She had heard Elliot say it once under his breath after a board call. 61% was not family concern. It was a target. That morning, Elliot arrived at the mansion at 10:15 wearing a navy suit, brown loafers, and the expression of a man practicing sadness. Miriam wheeled Julian into the library because Julian refused to meet family in his bedroom. No one who wanted power was allowed to see where he slept. The library smelled of leather, old paper, and rain pushing against the windows. Julian positioned his chair behind his father's mahogany desk. Elliot walked in without waiting to be announced. "Cousin," Elliot said warmly. "Don't." Elliot paused. "Don't what?" "Perform grief before lunch." Miriam looked down at the tablet in her hand to hide the flicker in her face. Elliot sighed and sat across from Julian. "I came because I care about you. You came because the board packet went out. That too. There it is." Elliot leaned forward, hands clasped. The silver cufflinks at his wrists bore the Marchand crest. Julian had approved the redesign 5 years ago and regretted it every time he saw them on Elliot. "We have a shareholder confidence issue," Elliot said. "We are private. We have lenders, partners, family stakeholders. Use smaller words." "You mean vultures." "I mean people are concerned. People are always concerned when there's money trapped behind a locked door." Elliot's face tightened, then relaxed. He was skilled at smoothing anger before it became visible. "Julian, the Miami acquisition is stalled. The riverfront renovation is over budget. The foundation gala is in 3 weeks, and you have not attended an in-person board session in 8 months. I attend remotely. You appear on a screen for 12 minutes, and then Miriam says you need rest. Miriam says what I tell her to say." Miriam did not look up. Elliot shifted in his chair. "Pierce believes the stress is accelerating your decline." Julian's gaze sharpened. "Pierce believes whatever keeps his retainer paid." "That's unfair." "It is accurate." Elliot took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the desk. He did not push it all the way forward. He knew Julian hated reaching for things in front of people. That small cruelty passed through the room like a cold draft. Miriam saw it. Julian did too. Neither reacted. "What is that?" Julian asked. "A temporary delegation framework. Temporary. For continuity. Another beautiful word for theft." Elliot's voice softened. "Your pride is going to damage what our grandfather built." Julian laughed once, no humor in it. "Our grandfather built 3 hotels and underpaid every woman who cleaned them. Let's not summon saints." Elliot stood. The mask slipped for half a second. In that half second, Julian saw the truth. Not concern, not impatience, hunger. "You cannot run an empire from a chair forever," Elliot said quietly. The room changed. Miriam's thumb stopped moving over the tablet. Rain ticked harder against the glass. Julian rolled his chair forward 1 inch. Only one, but it was enough to make Elliot's eyes drop to the wheels. That was what Julian hated most, when people looked at the chair before they looked back at him. "No," Julian said. His voice was low. "I cannot run an empire from a chair forever." Elliot breathed in, almost relief. Then Julian continued, "But I can run it from a grave longer than you could run it alive." Elliot's jaw tightened. He picked up the folder. "Think about it." "I already have." "And tell Pierce to find better lies." Elliot left without kissing the ring he pretended not to want. When the library door closed, Silence sat down in the chair he had vacated. Miriam crossed the room and picked up the glass of water Julian had not touched. His right hand was trembling. "Not much." "Enough. You need your medication," she said. "I need a different life." She looked at him then. Really looked. Not at the chairman. Not at the patient. At the man. For 11 years, Miriam Cole had watched wealthy specialists tell Julian what his body could not do, while his body kept whispering tiny protests nobody wanted to hear. A spasm in the left thigh after certain stretches. A flash of heat near the ankle when she adjusted his foot. A pressure response during transfers that Dr. Harlan dismissed as reflex. Reflex, the word doctors used when the body spoke, and they did not want to listen. Miriam had been a nurse too long to worship doctors. She respected skill. She did not respect arrogance dressed in a white coat. 2 days earlier, she had gone to St. Juan Agnes Community Rehab to visit an old friend after a knee replacement. She had been standing in the hallway when she saw Imani Toussaint place both hands on a dockworker's shoulder and tell him the pain was not where he thought it was. Miriam had watched the woman work, not perform. Work. She watched Imani find the locked place, watched the man lift his arm and stare at his own body like it had returned from war. Doctors kept reading Julian's scans. But maybe scans were not the only things worth reading. Julian turned his chair toward the window. Outside, rain slid down the glass in crooked lines. "You're thinking something," he said. Miriam did not deny it. "You'll hate it." "I hate most things." "There's a woman I want you to meet." "No." "You haven't heard what she does. If she sells crystals, fire yourself before I do. She works at St. Rita, Agnes, a charity clinic, a community rehab clinic. Same smell, better brochure." Miriam stepped closer. "She listens to bodies." Julian's closed his eyes. "Grande. Grada. She listens to bodies." Gowen closed his eyes. "God spare me from poetic nurses." "God has been trying. You keep refusing the call." That almost made him smile. Almost. Miriam set the untouched water back on the table. Then she said the sentence that would change everything. "Doctors keep reading your scans, Julian. I think we need someone who can read the man." He opened his eyes. The rain kept falling. Somewhere in New Orleans East, Imani Toussaint was counting $18.73 and wondering how to buy her son more breath. Somewhere in the Garden District, Julian Marchand was staring at legs the world had already buried, and between them, unknown to both, Miriam Cole had made a decision. Before the next storm passed, she would bring the woman with the healing hands to the man everyone had mistaken for finished. By the time Miriam Cole reached St. Neen, Agnes Community Rehab the next evening, Imani Toussaint had already worked 11 hours, eaten 1 pack of peanut butter crackers, missed 2 calls from the insurance company, and pretended not to notice the ache in her own right shoulder. Rain had come and gone all day. It left the sidewalk shining under the streetlights and made the clinic smell faintly of wet clothes, bleach, and old carpet. The front desk closed at 6, but St. Agnes never really closed at 6. People who were hurting did not schedule their pain around business hours. So Imani stayed. She stayed for Mrs. Henry, who needed help practicing the 3 steps between a chair and a walker. She stayed for a bus driver named Calvin, whose lower back had locked after 12 years of braking hard on broken streets. She stayed for a hotel housekeeper who kept apologizing for crying because pain had made her feel foolish. And after all of them left, Imani stayed for the sink full of therapy cups, the pile of towels, and the appeal form she still had not finished. She was in the back treatment room wiping down a vinyl table when the bell over the front door rang. Imani looked up. The clinic was supposed to be locked. She stepped into the hallway with the spray bottle still in one hand. A woman stood near the waiting room chairs, rain shining on the shoulders of her dark coat. She was older, maybe late 50s, with close-cropped gray hair, sensible shoes, and the kind of posture that told Imani she had spent most of her life giving orders in rooms where panic was not allowed. Not rich exactly, not flashy, but precise. The woman looked around the clinic once, not with disgust, with attention. She saw the stretched therapy bands, the chipped reception counter, the old motivational poster curling at the corner, the mop bucket by the hallway. Then she looked at Imani. "Ms. Toussaint, we're closed. I know. If you know, then you also know you should not be inside." The woman nodded once, as if she approved of the boundary. "My name is Miriam Cole." Imani did not move. "I don't know you." "No, but I watched you yesterday." "That is not making this better." Miriam's mouth almost curved. "Almost. I watched you help a dock worker lift his right arm after 6 months of failed treatment." Imani tightened her grip on the spray bottle. "Patient information is private. I do not want his information. Then what do you want?" Miriam glanced toward the treatment room. "I want 1 hour of your hands." The words landed strangely. Imani stared at her. "Excuse me? I work for a private client. He has a long-term spinal injury, severe pain, mobility loss. Every specialist has failed him. Then he needs another specialist. He has had 23. Then he needs God. He is not currently on speaking terms." That should not have made Imani want to smile. So she did not let it. She folded her arms. "I am not a doctor. I know. I do not diagnose spinal injuries. I know that too. Then you are in the wrong clinic, Ms. Cole." Miriam stepped closer, slowly enough not to make it feel like pressure. "I spent 31 years as a nurse. I know what doctors can do. I also know what they miss when pride gets between their eyes and the patient." Imani studied her. The woman was serious, not desperate in the messy way. Desperate in the controlled way. That was worse. "How did you get my name?" "Through a patient who said you gave him back his shoulder when everyone else gave him pills. That patient talks too much. He is grateful. Grateful people still get people in trouble." Miriam heard that. She heard the fear beneath the sentence. She did not rush past it. "This would be private." "No." "You would be paid." "No." $7,500 for an evaluation. The clinic became very quiet. Even the air conditioner seemed to stop rattling for a second. Imani looked at Miriam, then away. $7,500. The number did not enter her mind as money. It entered as a machine. It entered as a machine. It entered as Malik, sleeping through the night without the old nebulizer coughing beside him. It entered as rent paid before the notice. It entered as not choosing between the blue inhaler and the electric bill. Her face gave away nothing. Poor women who dealt with systems learned to keep their reactions inside until they could count the cost in private. Who is he? she asked. A man with more money than patience. That does not narrow it down in this city. He values privacy. So do I. There would be an NDA. There it is. Miriam's eyes softened a little. I am not here to buy your silence about something dirty. Rich people always say that before handing over paper. Miriam accepted the hit without flinching. You are right to be careful. I am not careful. I am tired. That too. Imani turned back toward the treatment room and picked up the towels she had dropped. My son is waiting for me at Bell's Wash and Fold. I know. Imani turned sharply. Miriam raised one hand. I know because I did my homework, not because anyone is watching him. You looked into my child. I looked into whether you had someone depending on you before I came here with an offer that could change your evening. Imani's voice dropped. Say his name again and this conversation is over. Miriam held her gaze. I will not. For the first time, Imani saw something beneath Miriam's professional stillness. Shame. Not enough to make the intrusion right, enough to make it human. Miriam reached into her coat and took out a plain envelope. She placed it on the reception counter. Half now. Half after the evaluation. Whether you can help him or not, Imani did not touch it. The envelope sat between them like a test. Why me? Imani asked. Miriam answered without hesitation. Because doctors keep reading his scans. I need someone who can read the man. The sentence moved through Imani before she could stop it. Solange would have understood it. Her grandmother would have nodded once and reached for the warm oil. But Solange had never had to pay Gulfstar benefits. Solange had never stood in a clinic hallway with $18.73 to her name and a child whose lungs were being debated by strangers. Imani looked toward the small window beside the door. Outside, headlights blurred in the rain. She could see her own reflection in the glass. Worn scrubs, tired eyes, hands that never got to rest. What time? She asked. Miriam breathed out. Now. Imani almost laughed. Of course, you can call whoever is watching your son. You can tell them where you are going. You can send them my name and number. You can take a photo of my license plate. That surprised her. Miriam took a business card from her pocket and set it beside the envelope. No blindfolds, no threats, no games. You are free to leave at any time. That should be basic. It should. And if your client does not like what I say, he will hate what you say. Then why bring me? Because I am done protecting his pride at the expense of his life. At 7:42, Imani called Miss Ruthie. She kept her voice steady. She said she had one leg client. She said she might be back after 9. Miss Ruthie asked one question. Do I need to write down somebody's license plate? Imani looked at Miriam. Miriam turned the business card over and wrote the plate number herself. Imani read it into the phone. Miss Ruthie was quiet for a second. Then she said, All right, Malik's doing homework. I'll feed him. If your spirit feels wrong, you leave. Yes, ma'am. And Imani? Yes? When the pot is empty, knocking is not shame. Imani closed her eyes. I know. No, you don't. But you will. The Marchand car waiting outside was not a limousine. That would have made Imani refuse on principle. It was a black Mercedes Maybach with tinted windows, quiet engine, and leather seats, so soft she felt accused by them. She sat in the back with her work bag on her lap, and the envelope untouched beside her. Miriam sat next to her. No one spoke for the first 8 minutes. New Orleans moved past in rain-colored fragments. Corner stores, shotgun houses, oaks hanging low over streets, restaurants glowing gold, tourists under umbrellas, men sleeping beneath awnings. Then the neighborhoods changed. Houses grew wider, gates grew taller, porches became galleries, gardens became statements. The car turned onto a street where the trees met overhead and the gas lamps burned, even in the rain. Imani looked out the window. She had cleaned houses on streets like this with her mother when she was a teenager. She knew the back doors of beauty. She knew the laundry rooms, the service stairs, the powder rooms guests admired and housekeepers scrubbed on their knees. Wealth did not intimidate her, but it did have a smell. Old wood, lemon polish, fresh flowers replaced before they wilted, air that had never had to choose between heat and groceries. The Marchand house rose behind iron gates at the end of a curved drive. White columns, black shutters, balconies wrapped in lace-like ironwork, live oaks dripping rain over the roof. It was beautiful in the way some things are beautiful because they have never been asked to apologize for taking up space. A guard opened the car door. Miriam stepped out first. Imani followed with her work bag over one shoulder and her chin level. Inside, the foyer was marble, candlelight, and silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind money buys when it does not want to hear the city outside. A chandelier hung above them like frozen water. Oil portraits watched from the walls. Somewhere in the distance, a clock chimed 8. Imani's sneakers squeaked once on the floor. She hated that she noticed. Miriam led her past the grand staircase, through a gallery lined with antique mirrors, and into the east wing. The air changed there. Less flowers, more antiseptic. Behind a pair of panel doors was a private therapy room, larger than the entire main floor of St. Agnes. There were parallel bars polished like sculpture, a tilt table, a hydrotherapy pool glowing blue beneath recessed lights, a wall of equipment Imani had only seen in continuing education videos she could not afford. Resistance machines, balance platforms, ultrasound therapy, electrical stimulation units, a cabinet labeled with supplies, sorted by size and purpose. Everything money could buy, and in the center of all that perfect equipment sat a man who looked like he had already dismissed her before she entered the room. Julian Marchand did not turn his chair immediately. He was near the windows, facing the dark garden beyond the glass. The wheelchair was matte black, sleek, engineered, almost beautiful. A silver-handled cane leaned against the wall nearby, not because he used it, but because rich families loved symbols even when the symbol had become a lie. Miriam stopped near the door. "Julian, I told you no more healers." His voice was low, refined, and exhausted. It carried without effort. "Good," Imani said before Miriam could answer. "I am not one." The chair turned. Julian looked at her. He did not look at her the way most wealthy people looked at working women. Not through her. At her. Which was worse in a different way. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and sharpened by years of pain into something almost cruel. His shirt sleeves were rolled to the elbow. His hands were strong from 11 years of moving his own body. His legs lay still beneath tailored trousers, expensive fabric draped over silence. He took in her scrubs, her work bag, her sneakers, the tiredness she had not been able to hide. Then his gaze returned to her face. "Miriam has become sentimental. Miriam has become observant," Imani said. One corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "You are bold for someone standing in a stranger's house. You are rude for someone asking a stranger for help." Miriam inhaled softly near the door. Julian's eyes changed, just a flicker. Interest, maybe, or irritation that had found a worthy target. "I did not ask." "No, she did." "Then you may leave with her." Imani looked at Miriam, then back at Julian. "I have a son waiting for me and a bus schedule that does not care about billionaires. If you want to waste the hour, waste it quickly." Silence dropped. Julian stared at her. Then, for the first time since she entered, something alive crossed his face. Not kindness. Not hope. A challenge. "What do you think you can do that 23 specialists could not?" "I do not know yet." At least the charlatans had confidence. Confidence is cheap. Information is better. And what information do you need? Your real pain, not the version you give doctors to make them leave faster. Miriam looked down. Julian did not. For a moment, the room held. Rain touched the windows. The hydrotherapy pool hummed quietly. Then Julian rolled his chair toward the treatment table. 40 minutes, he said. You paid for 60. You have 40 before I get bored. You have 11 years of being bored. I think you can survive 20 more minutes. This time, Miriam did smile. Only for a second. Julian transferred himself to the table with practiced strength. No one helped him. Imani noticed that too. Pride had a choreography. He locked the chair, placed one hand on the table, lifted, shifted, dragged the dead weight of his lower body with brutal efficiency and no wasted motion. When he was face down, he turned his head toward the window. Do not perform pity, Miss Toussaint. I charge extra for pity. His shoulders moved once, maybe a laugh, maybe a spasm. Imani washed her hands at the sink. She took her time, not because she wanted to make him wait, because touching a body without preparing your own spirit was something Solange had called bad manners. She warmed a small amount of neutral oil between her palms. Not the fragrant kind. Not the kind that made rich people think healing smelled like lavender. Plain oil. Quiet oil. She stepped to the table and placed both hands lightly on either side of Julian's lower back. The first thing she felt was heat. Not skin heat. Guarding heat. The body's old alarm. Then density. Layer upon layer of scarred tissue. Overworked muscle, rigid fascia, and fear hardened into structure. His back did not feel dead. It felt defended. Imani closed her eyes. Julian turned his head slightly. Praying? Listening. To what? To the part of you everyone keeps calling silent. He did not answer. She moved slowly at first, mapping, not pressing, not fixing, finding. The scars were extensive but clean. The surgeries had left their signatures. Deep lines near the lumbar spine. Adhesions pulling diagonally. Left side more guarded than right. His hip flexors were shortened from years of sitting. His pelvis was locked in a protective tilt. His lower back had become a fortress, but fortresses were built because something inside was worth protecting. You have sensation here? She asked, pressing near the right sacroiliac joint. Pressure. Pain. No. She shifted half an inch. Here, nothing. Another inch. Here, nothing. Another inch. Here, no. She moved to the left side. His fingers tightened on the edge of the table. There. Tiny. But there. You felt that. No. Your hand did. My hand is dramatic. Your hand is honest. Miriam stood near the wall, very still. Imani changed the angle of her thumb and sank slowly into the tissue above his left hip. Julian's whole back tensed. Stop fighting me. I am not. You are. Your body thinks I am here to hurt you. A reasonable assumption. I am here to hurt you. A reasonable assumption. I am here to ask it a question. My body has not answered questions in 11 years. Maybe nobody asked in the right language. She pressed deeper, not suddenly, not brutally, with patient force. Julian inhaled through his teeth. The sound was small, but the room heard it. Imani held the pressure. Breathe. I know how to breathe. No. You know how to endure. Different skill. His head turned toward her. If he could have stood, she suspected he would have thrown her out. Instead, he breathed. Once, twice. The tissue under her hand shifted. Not much. Enough. A line of tension softened beneath her thumb, and with it came a response so fast, Julian almost knocked his elbow against the table. His left leg jumped. Not the whole leg. Not dramatically. A flicker through the thigh, then down. At the end of the table, beneath the polished leather shoe no one had expected to move, Julian Marchand's big toe bent downward. Only a fraction. Only once. But enough to change the room. Miriam's hand flew to her mouth. Imani froze, her thumb still sunk into the tissue. Julian pushed himself up on one elbow so fast, pain flashed across his face. What was that? His voice was not cold now. It was stripped bare. Imani looked at his foot, then at him. Your toe moved. No. Yes. Miriam. Miriam's eyes were wet. She nodded. It moved, Julian. The billionaire stared at his own foot like it had betrayed him by returning. For 11 years, people had asked him to accept a dead thing. For 11 years, he had built a life around a closed door. And now this woman in worn-out scrubs had touched the frame and heard something breathing on the other side. He looked back at Imani. The cruelty was gone from his eyes. So was the boredom. What remained was more dangerous. Hope. Raw. Furious. Almost unbearable. If you are wrong, he said quietly, you will ruin me. Imani removed her hands from his back. She wiped them on a towel and met his eyes. No, Mr. Marchand. Her voice was steady, but her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. If I am right, someone already did. Miriam looked from Imani to Julian. Julian did not speak. Outside, thunder rolled over the garden district. Inside the marble therapy room, beside equipment worth more than St. Agnes made in a year, the first impossible thing had happened. Not a miracle. Not yet. Just a toe. Just one buried signal, breaking through 11 years of silence. But by morning, that tiny movement would become the most dangerous secret in the Marchand house. And Imani Toussaint, who had only come because her son needed medicine, would become the one woman Julian's family could not afford to let him believe. By sunrise, the toe movement had become a secret, with a pulse. Miriam did not write it in the official chart. Imani did not mention it to anyone at St. Agnes. Julian did not call Dr. Harlan. That was the first decision he made. And it frightened him more than the movement itself. For 11 years, every change in his body had been measured, labeled, explained, and filed away by other people. Pain was recorded. Medication was adjusted. Decline was documented. His body had become a property managed by experts. But this one tiny movement belonged to no one yet. Not Harlan, not Elliot, not the board, not the family trust. Just Julian, Miriam, and the woman in worn-out scrubs who had looked at his dead leg and called it a liar. At 6:30 the next morning, Julian sat alone in the therapy room, staring at his left foot. The shoe had been removed. His sock was black, thin, expensive, ridiculous. He had spent 10 minutes trying to make the toe move again. Nothing happened. Not even a twitch. His jaw tightened. Hope, he was discovering, was not soft. Hope was violent. It entered the body like a blade and made every old surrender bleed again. Miriam found him there with the lights off. You have not slept, she said. I was busy walking marathons. You moved one toe. Do not diminish my athletic achievement. She crossed the room and placed a cup of coffee on the small table beside him. No Harlan? No Harlan. Why? Julian did not answer immediately. Outside the windows, rainwater clung to the garden leaves, silver in the early light. Because if I tell him, he will explain it away before I can feel it. Miriam stood behind him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she said, Imani can come again tonight. Julian's hand closed around the armrest. How much? She asked for nothing beyond what we already agreed. That is not an answer. It is the answer. Julian looked toward the parallel bars, polished and unused. Pay her double. She may refuse. Then triple it. She may still refuse. Julian turned his chair. People do not refuse money, Miriam. They refuse humiliation. Miriam studied him. Then be careful which one you offer. That night, Imani returned after putting Malik to sleep on Miss Ruthie's old vinyl sofa behind the laundromat. At least, that was what she told herself. The truth was that Malik was not asleep. He was lying under a faded saint's blanket, with his eyes half closed, listening to his mother whisper instructions to Miss Ruthie about medication times, water, fever, and what to do if his breathing changed. He kept still because he knew stillness made adults feel safer. When Imani bent to kiss him, Malik let his breathing deepen. She touched the blue pouch beside his hand. "Keep this close." He nodded without opening his eyes. After the laundromat door shut behind her, Miss Ruthie walked over and looked down at him. "You can stop pretending now." Malik opened one eye. "How did you know?" "Baby, I raised 3 boys. Fake sleep has a smell." He sat up slowly. "Is Mom going to be okay?" Miss Ruthie pulled a chair beside the sofa. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether the rich man has sense enough to listen." Malik looked at the blue pouch in his hand. The repaired white stitches caught on his thumb. "My mom's good at helping people listen." "Yes, she is. She does not always help herself." Miss Ruthie's face softened. There it was again. A child carrying a sentence that should have been too heavy for him. "She is learning," Miss Ruthie said. Malik looked toward the window, where the street lights shone on wet pavement. "Can grown-ups learn fast?" Miss Ruthie did not answer right away. Then she said, "When pain gets loud enough, yes." At the Marchand house, Imani entered through the front door again, not the service entrance. Miriam had insisted on that. Julian had said nothing when she told him. But the next evening, the guard opened the main gate before the car stopped, and the front doors were waiting. Imani noticed. She noticed everything. The therapy room was brighter this time. The pool lights were off. The parallel bars gleamed under warm overhead lamps. Julian was already on the treatment table, face down, shirt loosened at the back, his wheelchair locked beside him. "You are early," Imani said. "I live here." "You are early to the table. I thought I would save you the lecture. I had 3 ready. Keep them. I am sure I will earn them." She set her bag down and washed her hands. The envelope from the night before had paid Malik's overdue pharmacy balance, 2 weeks of rent, and the application fee for the second insurance appeal. She had stood at the pharmacy counter holding the receipt and feeling nothing. Relief would come later, maybe. Or maybe it would not. Sometimes survival moved so quickly that gratitude could not catch up. She began with his lower back again, not where she had ended the night before. Around it. Above it. Below it. She was careful not to chase the toe. Chasing one symptom was how people missed the body. "The movement may not repeat tonight," she said. Julian's voice came through the face cradle. "I know. No, you do not. You know it as information. I need you to know it as patience. I am not known for patience. Your body is." That made him quiet. She pressed slowly into the scarred tissue near his left hip. His fingers tightened, but he did not snap at her. Progress had many forms. For Julian Marchand, silence was one of them. Over the next 12 days, Imani came 5 times. Never at the same hour. Never through the same rhythm. Miriam arranged the schedule around Harlan's visits and Elliot's meetings. Some nights, Imani worked until almost midnight, then slept 3 hours before waking to check Malik's breathing. Some mornings, Julian sat in board calls with pain burning down his left thigh, listening to Elliot discuss expansion forecasts while trying not to stare at the foot that had begun to feel like a distant country, sending messages in a language he barely remembered. The second session produced nothing. The third gave him a hotline of sensation behind the knee that made him curse so sharply Miriam dropped a towel. The fourth brought a twitch in the left thigh. The fifth made his calf cramp so hard he nearly vomited. Imani looked pleased. Julian looked betrayed. "You are smiling at my suffering." "I am smiling at response. It feels like a knife. A knife means the line is open. I have fired people for less comfort. Good thing I do not work for you." He turned his head toward her. "Everyone in this house works for me." "No. Everyone in this house is paid by you." "That is not the same thing." He held her gaze, then looked away first. That was new too. In those sessions, Imani learned Julian's body. She learned the left side guarded before the right. She learned his pain sharpened when he was angry and dulled when he was ashamed. She learned he joked when afraid. She learned he hated being touched lightly because light touch made him feel like glass. She learned that deep pressure grounded him. She learned his lower back held 11 years of people trying not to hurt him and hurting him anyway. Julian learned Imani's silences. He learned she hummed under her breath when concentrating. Not a song exactly, more like memory. He learned she checked her phone only when she thought he was not looking. He learned her face changed when the name Malik appeared on the screen. He learned she never complained about being tired, which meant she always was. He learned she could stand in a room full of machines worth hundreds of thousands of dollars and choose her hands first. On the 13th day, Malik came with her. There was no plan for it. Plans were luxuries, and that afternoon Malik's school had called because he had coughed hard enough after recess to scare his teacher. No fever. No crisis. Just one of those narrow hours where nothing was technically an emergency, but everything felt close enough to one. Miss Ruthie had a funeral to attend. The neighbor who sometimes helped was working. Imani almost canceled. Miriam heard the strain in her voice and said, "Bring him." "No. There is a medical wing here. That is exactly why no." Imani. He is not decoration for a billionaire's guilt. No one said he was. He has been looked at enough. Miriam was quiet. Then she said, "Then bring him where no one looks at him. Bring him to me." Imani hated that the offer helped. She hated more that she accepted. Malik entered the Marchand house holding the blue pouch in one hand and his library book in the other. He did not gape at the chandelier. He did not touch the antique table. He did not ask if Julian was famous. He simply walked beside his mother with the careful politeness of a child who had spent too much time in waiting rooms. Miriam led him to a chair in the corner of the therapy room and brought a bottle of water, a blanket, and a small tray of crackers. Malik looked at the crackers, then at his mother. She nodded. Only then did he take one. Julian watched this from his wheelchair. The boy was thin, but not fragile. There was a difference. Fragile meant breakable. This child looked like he had learned to bend around fear. "What is your name?" Julian asked. "Malik." "I am Julian." "I am Julian." "I know." "Do you?" "My mom told me not to ask questions about you." Julian glanced at Imani. Imani closed her eyes for half a second. Malik continued, "So I looked at the portraits instead." Miriam coughed into her hand. Julian's mouth twitched. "And what did the portraits tell you?" "That rich people like looking serious." This time Julian did smile, a real one, brief and surprised. Imani pointed at her son. "Homework." Malik opened his book. For the next hour, Imani worked on Julian, while Malik read about Saturn's rings. Every few minutes, the boy's breathing whistled faintly. Every time, Imani's hands paused. Every time, Malik turned a page loudly, as if to prove he was fine. Julian noticed. Of course he noticed. Men who lived in pain became experts in concealment. When the session ended, Julian's left thigh had responded twice. Small contractions, unsteady, but voluntary. Imani stepped away to wash her hands. Malik slid from his chair and walked toward the wall, where Julian's silver-handled cane rested beside the locked wheelchair. The cane was polished, elegant, almost ceremonial. Malik stood in front of it with the blue pouch in his hand. Then he placed the pouch carefully on the small bench beside the cane. Imani turned from the sink. "Malik, I am just putting it here." Julian looked at the pouch. It looked impossibly poor in that room. Soft fabric, white stitches, a zipper that did not fully close. Beside the cane, it looked like two worlds had been forced to sit next to each other and explain themselves. Malik touched the pouch once with his finger. "My lungs act dead sometimes," he said. The room went still. Imani dried her hands slowly. Julian did not move. Malik kept looking at the cane. Not really dead, just tired, or mad, or stuck. "That is what Mom says." He turned to Julian. "Sometimes breathing hurts too. You just do not tell people because they get scared." No one spoke. The sentence entered Julian quietly and went somewhere no doctor had ever reached. For 11 years, he had thought silence was control. He had thought hiding pain protected power. He had thought if people did not see him suffer, they could not use it. But this boy had named the cost. You do not tell people because they get scared. Imani walked to Malik and placed one hand on his shoulder. That is enough, baby. I was just saying. I know. Julian looked at the blue pouch beside his cane. Then he looked at Imani. For the first time, he understood that she was not working for money alone. She was working against time, against letters, against machines that failed, against a world that kept asking her son to prove his breath was necessary. That night, after Imani and Malik left, Julian sat alone in the therapy room for a long time. The cane remained against the wall. The bench beside it was empty now, but he could still see the pouch there. Small, blue, patched, honest. He called Miriam. Find out who denied the boy's equipment. Miriam stood near the doorway. Imani will hate that. I am not asking for permission. That is exactly what she will hate. Julian exhaled. Pain moved down his leg in a slow burning line. Then find out quietly. Miriam did not move. Miriam, you are trying to help like a man who signs things. It is one of my few remaining talents. You want to help that child? Yes. Then do not turn him into a debt. Julian's jaw tightened. The old answer rose in him. I pay. People accept. Problems move. But Imani's voice interrupted before he could say it. Everyone in this house is paid by you. That is not the same thing. He looked back at the cane. What do you suggest? Ask. He almost laughed. The word felt absurd. Men like Julian did not ask. They instructed. They authorized. They acquired. They solved. But he had spent 11 years being solved by men who had not asked the right questions. Maybe Miriam was right. Maybe asking was not weakness. Maybe it was a door. The next morning, Julian Marchand noticed the first change. Not in Julian's legs. In the schedule. A private evening appointment blocked under Miriam's access code. Then another. Then another. No physician listed. No Harlan approval. No board notification. Elliot sat in his office on the 34th floor of the Marchand Beridian headquarters, watching rain stripe the windows while his assistant reviewed gala seating charts. He heard none of it. His eyes remained on the internal calendar. Miriam, he said softly. He had never liked Miriam Cole. Competence was tolerable when it served hierarchy. Miriam's competence served Julian. That made her dangerous. He called Dr. Pierce Harlan. The doctor answered on the third ring. This had better matter. There are private therapy blocks in Julian's schedule. A pause. What kind of therapy? That is what I am asking you. I did not approve any new therapy. Then someone is working around you. Another pause. Longer this time. Elliot leaned back in his chair. Could it matter? Harlan's voice lowered. With Julian, anything that gives him hope matters. That is not what I asked. If someone is manipulating tissue around the injury site, triggering spasms, creating sensation, he may interpret it as improvement. Is it improvement? I would need to examine him. Then examine him. Julian will refuse if Miriam has coached him. Elliot's reflection stared back from the dark glass. Behind him, a framed rendering of the Miami acquisition hung on the wall. A property Julian had not wanted. A property Elliot needed. If the incapacity vote passed, Miami would go through. If Julian regained control, years of maneuvering could collapse in one public meeting. Find out who she is, Elliot said. I already have a guess. Harlan's tone had changed. There was irritation in it. And something else. Fear. A woman? A rehab aide from St. Agnes. I have heard her name from charity clinics. Imani Toussaint. Elliot smiled faintly. Good. Good. Women with hourly wages are easier to move than surgeons. You do not know that. I know everyone has a price. Harlan did not answer. Elliot opened a new search window and typed her name. Within minutes, pieces of Imani's life appeared in front of him. Licensing record. Clinic profile. Old fundraiser photo. Address. History. No car. Single child. Insurance appeal. Outstanding medical balance. Elliot stared at the screen. Then his smile became colder. There it is. What? Her price is not money. At 7 o'clock that evening, Imani found an envelope taped to the inside of her apartment door. No stamp. No return address. Her name written neatly across the front. Malik was at the kitchen table doing fractions. The blue pouch lay beside his pencil. Imani looked through the peephole first. Empty hallway. Then she opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for $50,000. Behind it was a single typed page. Ms. Toussaint, for your protection and the protection of your son, you were advised to cease all unauthorized treatment of Julian Marchand immediately. If you sign the enclosed statement confirming that Mr. Marchand showed no meaningful improvement under your care, the attached funds are yours. If you continue, all relevant licensing bodies, insurance authorities, and child welfare agencies will be notified of your activities. This is your only warning. Imani read it once, then again. The kitchen seemed to tilt around her. Malik looked up. Mom? She folded the letter slowly. Too slowly. Children noticed speed. Everything okay? There it was. Okay. Their family's smallest lie. Imani looked at her son, his thin shoulders, his pencil in one hand, the blue pouch beside him, patched with white thread. $50,000 sat in her hand. Enough to buy the machine. Enough to move. Enough to breathe for a while. All she had to do was lie about a man everyone else had already buried. All she had to do was become one more person paid to keep Julian Marchand in the chair. She placed the check back inside the envelope. Then she walked to the stove, turned on the flame, and held the letter over it. The edge caught first. Orange light crawled up the paper. Malik stood. Mom? Imani dropped the burning page into the sink and watched it curl into ash. She did not burn the check. Not yet. She would need evidence. Her hands were shaking now, but her voice was steady. Finish your fractions, baby. What happened? She looked at the ash in the sink, then at the blue pouch, then at the hands her grandmother had taught to listen. Somebody is scared. That night, as rain began again over New Orleans, Imani Toussaint understood two things clearly. Julian Marchand's body was waking up, and someone powerful was willing to threaten a sick child to keep the world from knowing it. Imani did not sleep that night. The cashier's check sat inside a cereal box above the refrigerator because that was the only place in the apartment Malik never looked. The burned letter had become ash in the kitchen sink, but the words had not burned with it. Licensing bodies, insurance authorities, child welfare agencies, for your protection and the protection of your son. That was how powerful people threatened you when they wanted to sound clean. They did not say, "We will hurt you." They said, "We are concerned." They said, "We are reviewing." They said, "This is in the best interest of the child." Imani sat at the kitchen table until morning, with one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee, gone cold, and the other resting on the blue pouch. Malik slept in the next room. At least, she hoped he did. At 5:12, his door opened. He came out in pajama pants and a school t-shirt, rubbing one eye. The blue pouch was in his hand. "You were up all night," he said. "I was thinking." "About the rich man?" "About a lot of things." Malik climbed into the chair across from her. His feet did not touch the floor. That detail almost undid her. He placed the pouch on the table between them like an offering. "Is somebody mad because you helped him?" Imani looked at her son. Children were not supposed to understand the shape of danger this quickly, but Malik had spent his life listening to adults lower their voices outside hospital rooms. He knew when fear had entered the house. "Somebody wants me to stop," she said. "Are you going to?" The honest answer was complicated. The mother answer came first. "I have to keep you safe." Malik nodded. Then he touched the white stitches on the pouch. Grandma Solange said hands that heal should not be scared of power. Imani went still. She had not known he remembered that. She also said children should not eavesdrop. She said that less. Despite herself, Imani laughed once. It came out small and broken. Malik did not smile. If they are scared of you helping him, maybe that means he can get better. That sentence stayed with her all the way to the Marchand house. By 8:40, Imani was standing in Julian's therapy room with the envelope in her hand. Julian sat near the windows, dressed for a board call in a white shirt and charcoal trousers. His wheelchair angled so the morning light cut across his face. Miriam stood beside the therapy table, arms folded. She knew something was wrong before Imani spoke. Nurses always did. Imani placed the envelope on the table. Julian looked at it, then at her. What is that? Your family's first offer. The air changed. Miriam stepped forward. Imani. It was taped inside my apartment door. Julian's hand tightened on the wheel. Your apartment? My apartment. Where my son sleeps. She opened the envelope and took out the check. $50,000. Julian stared at it without touching it. Then she placed the typed statement beside it. I'm supposed to sign that you showed no meaningful improvement under my care. Miriam read the first lines and closed her eyes. Julian did not move. For a few seconds he became frighteningly still. Not calm. Still. There was a difference. Who sent it? He asked. No name. Elliot. He said it like a diagnosis. Imani looked at him. You know that? Imani looked at him. You know that? I know my cousin. Then why are you letting him get this close? The question struck harder than she intended. Miriam looked at Julian. Julian's eyes stayed on the check. Because for 11 years, everyone close to me has sounded like a doctor. Imani heard what he did not say. Everyone had sounded certain. Everyone had sounded certain. Everyone had sounded final. Everyone had sounded reasonable while they took one piece of him at a time. She softened, but only a little. This is not just about you anymore. I know. No. Now I need you to know it in your bones. They mentioned my son without saying his name. That is not money. That is a hand around my throat. Julian rolled closer to the table and picked up the check. He looked at the amount. Then he tore it in half. Imani reached out fast. No. He stopped. The check was torn through one corner, but not destroyed. What? We need evidence. Julian looked at the torn edge, then at her. For the first time that morning, something like respect moved across his face. You think like someone who has been cornered before. I think like a mother. Miriam took the check and letter, placed them into a clear plastic sleeve, and locked them in a cabinet. Before anyone could speak again, the therapy room doors opened. Dr. Pierce Harlan entered without knocking. Julian Marchand followed half a step behind him. Imani understood immediately. This was not an accident. Harlan wore a gray suit beneath his white coat, as if he could not decide whether he wanted to look medical or expensive. Elliot wore concern, like a pressed shirt. He looked at Imani first, then the table, then the cabinet where Miriam had just locked the evidence. His eyes moved too quickly. Julian saw it. So did Imani. Pierce, Julian said. I do not remember requesting a visit. Harlan smiled thinly. Your family requested one on your behalf. My family has many habits I dislike. Elliot stepped forward. We are worried about unauthorized treatment. Imani folded her arms. Good morning to you, too. Elliot gave her a smile built for donors. Ms. Toussaint, this is not personal. It became personal when someone came to my home. His smile flickered. Only once. Harlan turned to Julian. I need to examine you. No. Julian. If this woman has been manipulating the injury site without clinical approval, she may be causing severe neurological irritation. Imani said. He moved his toe. Harlan looked at her as if she had dropped a dirty towel on the marble floor. Reflexive response. It was not reflexive. You are not qualified to determine that. And you are too invested to admit it. Miriam's head turned slightly. Julian looked at Imani. Harlan's face hardened. This is exactly the danger. False hope. Suggestible patience. Unlicensed claims. I made no claim. You told him his legs were not dead. I told him the tissue was still fighting. Poetry is not medicine. No, but neither is burying progress because it ruins a legal plan. The room went silent. Elliot's eyes cooled. Harlan took one step toward her. Be careful. Imani did not move. I have been careful my whole life. It has not saved me yet. Julian's voice cut through the room. Miriam. The files. Harlan turned sharply. What files? Miriam opened a locked drawer beneath the equipment cabinet and removed a folder. Not the official folder Harlan updated each week. An older one. Thicker. Paper. Stamped with hospital archive marks. Harlan's expression changed before he could hide it. Julian saw that too. Miriam placed the folder in front of Imani. I requested copies from the original rehabilitation hospital 3 months ago, Miriam said. You did what? Harlan snapped. I got tired of being told not to notice things. Imani opened the folder. Old surgical notes. Early rehab assessments. Nerve conduction studies. Physical therapy reports from the first year after the accident. She read quickly, but not carelessly. Her finger moved down the page, then stopped. There. Julian rolled closer. What? Imani turned the page toward him. 6 months after the accident. Left plantar response present under deep pressure. Harlan said, a reflex. Imani turned another page. 14 months. Patient reported heat sensation down posterior thigh during assisted hip extension. Neuropathic pain. Another page. 2 years. Voluntary contraction, suspected but inconsistent. Miriam whispered, I knew it. Julian stared at the words. Voluntary contraction, suspected. No one had ever said that to him? Not once. Not in 11 years. Imani flipped to a more recent report. Then her face went still. What is it? Julian asked. She placed 2 pages side by side. One was an archive scan summary from 8 years ago. The other was Harlan's current chart language. The old report says incomplete injury with possible peripheral compression. She tapped the second page. Your current chart says permanent lower limb non-response due to irreversible central damage. Julian looked at Harlan. The doctor's face had gone pale beneath the polished tan. That is a clinical interpretation. That is a coffin with grammar, Imani said. Elliot stepped in. Enough. Julian, this is becoming emotional. Julian did not look at him. His eyes stayed on Harlan. You changed the story. I refined the diagnosis. You buried the possibility. I protected you from dangerous expectations. Julian's voice lowered. No. You protected someone else from my recovery. Elliot moved toward the door. Miriam blocked him. She did not touch him. She did not have to. Move, Elliot said. Miriam looked at him the way nurses look at men who mistake volume for authority. No. Julian looked at Imani. How long? How long what? If the old reports were right, if you are right, how long before I stand? Imani answered carefully. You have already stood for years in the wrong places. That is not what I asked. No. It is what you need to hear. His jaw flexed. She stepped closer. I cannot promise walking. I cannot promise a miracle. I can promise pain, failure, humiliation, and work. I can promise your body is not as silent as they told you. I can promise if we do this, you will find out the truth. Julian looked at the parallel bars, then at Harlan, then at Elliot. His face changed. Not into hope this time. Into decision. Get out, he said. Harlan opened his mouth. Julian's voice snapped. Both of you. Elliot straightened his jacket. You are making a mistake. No, for the first time in years, I am making it myself. Elliot smiled then. Small. Ugly. You still need the board. Julian rolled his chair forward. And you still need me in this chair. Elliot said nothing. But his silence answered. When the doors closed behind them, the therapy room felt larger and more dangerous. Miriam locked the doors. Julian remained still for a long moment. Then he took off his watch and placed it on the bench beside the silver cane. "Tell me what to do." Imani looked at him. "You are not ready." "I did not ask if I was ready." "You could injure yourself." "I have been injured." "You could fall." "I have been falling for 11 years." The words hung there. Imani thought of Malik at the kitchen table. If they are scared of you helping him, maybe that means he can get better. She moved to the parallel bars. "Then we do this my way." Julian transferred from the chair with Miriam's help, not because he wanted help, because Imani demanded it. They positioned him between the bars. His hands gripped the steel. His arms knew how to hold him. His legs did not. Not yet. Imani knelt in front of him, one hand at his left knee, one at his ankle. Miriam stood behind him. "Do not pull yourself up," Imani said. "I have no other method. You do today. Drive through your heels. Let the floor talk back." "That sounds ridiculous." "It will still work if you complain." He inhaled. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his shoulders shook. His jaw clenched. A sound tore from him, low and raw. His thighs trembled under Imani's hands. The left knee tried to buckle. She blocked it. Again. "I am trying." "No. You are surviving. Try." Julian's face went white. Sweat broke across his forehead. His arms strained. His legs shook. Then, slowly, impossibly, his weight shifted downward. Not into the bars. Into the floor. His feet pressed. His knees locked. His hips rose. Miriam gasped. Imani did not. She could not afford to. "Breathe," she said. Julian Marchand stood. Not fully straight. Not gracefully. Not like the man in the portraits. He stood like a ruined building refusing demolition. Shaking. Bent. Furious. Alive. Imani counted under her breath. 1. Julian's hands clamped around the bars. 2. His left leg trembled violently. 3. Miriam cried silently behind him. 4. Julian looked down at Imani. His eyes were wet, but no tear fell. 5. By 12, his breath turned ragged. By 17, his right knee began to fold. By 21, Imani said, "Down." He collapsed back into the chair with a sound that was half pain and half disbelief. No one spoke. For 11 years, the world had called his body finished. For 21 seconds, his body had answered for itself. Julian leaned forward, elbows on knees, shaking. Then he looked at the closed doors. "They cannot know yet." Imani nodded. "No." Miriam wiped her face. "The shareholder meeting is in 2 weeks." Julian turned toward the silver cane. The cane no longer looked decorative. It looked patient, waiting. "They wanted a corpse in a chair," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Then we will give them a man who walks into his own burial." Imani picked up the blue pouch from where Malik had left it the day before. She placed it beside the cane. Julian looked at the two objects together. A billionaire's cane. A child's patched and healer pouch. Power and breath. Pride and survival. Both waiting for someone brave enough to use them. "You understand what this means?" Julian asked. Imani looked toward the locked cabinet, holding the check and the letter, then back at the man in the chair who was no longer only a man in a chair. "It means your family is lying." "No," Julian said quietly. "It means they are afraid." Outside, rain began again over the garden district. Inside the therapy room, the secret changed shape. It was no longer a twitch. It was no longer hope. It was evidence. And evidence, in the hands of people who had been underestimated, could become a weapon no family fortune could survive. By the next morning, the Marchand house had learned to whisper. Servants lowered their voices in hallways. Security guards stopped talking when Miriam passed. The kitchen staff knew nothing, which meant they knew something. In houses like that, secrets traveled through silence faster than footsteps. Julian did not leave the East Wing. Officially, he was resting. Unofficially, he was learning how to stand without looking like a man being torn apart from the inside. Imani came before dawn now. Not every day. His body could not survive every day. But often enough that her life began to split in two. In one world, she was still Imani Toussaint from New Orleans East, riding the bus with Malik's blue pouch in her bag, counting pills, washing uniforms in Miss Ruthie's back sink, filling out appeal forms that asked for proof her son deserved to breathe. In the other world, she stood in a marble therapy room beside a billionaire who could buy a hospital but could not buy back 11 stolen years. Julian had made it to 21 seconds once, then 24, then 18, because progress was not a staircase, it was weather. Some days his left leg responded. Some days his left leg responded. Some days it abandoned him. Some days the pain turned his face gray and he said nothing for an entire session except, again. Imani hated that word from him. Not because he used it too much, because she understood it too well. Again was what poor mothers said every morning. Again, get up. Again, count the medicine. Again, smile at the school secretary. Again, call the insurance company. Again, make dinner out of what is left. Again, keep breathing. Julian's again came from pride. Hers came from survival. Both could destroy a person if nobody knew when to say stop. On the 8th day of secret training, Julian fell. Not collapsed. Fell. His right knee misfired while he was shifting weight from one foot to the other. His hands slipped on the parallel bars. Miriam lunged, but Imani was closer. She caught him under the arms, taking the full force of him against her chest. His body was heavier than she expected, not because of his size, because defeat has weight. They went down together onto the padded mat. Julian landed half against her, breathing hard, one hand gripping the floor like he wanted to punish it for existing. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Imani could feel his heart hammering through his shirt. She could feel the tremor in his legs. She could feel his fury before he spoke. "Get off me," he said. "You are on me." "Then move." "No." His head snapped toward her. "No, no, no." Miriam stood frozen beside the bars. Imani kept her arms around his upper body. Not tenderly, not romantically, but firmly, the way she held patience when panic tried to throw them back into injury. "You are going to breathe first." I said move, and I said breathe. Julian's eyes were wild. For the first time, Imani saw not the chairman, not the billionaire, not the man with the cane waiting like a throne beside the wall. She saw a man trapped on the floor by a body he still did not trust. "I hate this," he said. The words came out rough and low. "I hate every second of this." "I know." "No, you do not know." "You are right." His jaw clenched. "I hate needing help to fall." Imani's voice softened. "Everybody needs help to fall safely. I am not everybody. That is part of your problem." He stared at her. The anger in him searched for somewhere to land. She did not offer a place. After a moment, his gaze broke first. His forehead lowered until it almost touched her shoulder. The room went quiet. Not empty. Quiet. There was a difference. "I was a fool," he whispered. Miriam looked away. Imani did not. "How?" "I thought standing up would make me whole." He let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "I stood for 24 seconds yesterday and spent the rest of the night unable to reach a glass of water without Miriam pretending not to see my hand shake." Miriam said nothing. Julian closed his eyes. "I do not want them to see me like this." "Who?" "My family." "Why?" "Why?" "Because weakness is blood in the water." Imani looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "No. Weakness is needing something and pretending you do not." That hit him. She felt it through his body. A tightening, then a release. "Is that what you do?" he asked. "Yes." The honesty surprised both of them. Imani swallowed. "I do it every day." Julian lifted his head. She should have looked away. She did not. My son asks how much things cost before he asks if they will help him, she said. My 9-year-old keeps track of his inhaler because he thinks my fear is his job. He lies and says he is breathing okay because he does not want to make my life harder. Her voice stayed steady, but only because she forced it to. And I let him think I believe him, because if I look too closely at what poverty has taught him, I will break in front of him. Julian's face changed. Imani had touched nerves in his body for days. Now she had touched something worse. His understanding. You should not have to live like that, he said. No, she shifted, helping him sit upright. But do not make the mistake of thinking a check fixes what the world has trained him to carry. Before Julian could answer, Miriam's phone buzzed. She checked the screen. Her face hardened. What is it? Julian asked. Miriam looked at Imani first, then Julian. Elliot filed an emergency ethics complaint against Imani with the state therapy board. Imani went still. Miriam continued, her voice controlled. He also sent notice to Gulf Star Benefits alleging improper medical activity involving a minor in a private residence. My son? Imani said. Miriam did not answer fast enough. That was answer enough. Mani stood. The room tilted slightly, but she forced her body still. What exactly did he say? Miriam read from the message on her screen that you transported a medically fragile child into an unsafe environment while performing unauthorized therapy for financial compensation. Imani felt the air leave her lungs, not all at once, slowly, like someone had opened a valve inside her chest. Julian's face went cold. He did what? Miriam looked at him. There is more. Say it. He has requested a child welfare wellness review. The word struck Imani harder than the $50,000 check. Child welfare, not because she had done wrong, because systems did not need truth to frighten a mother. They needed a form, a call, a visit at the wrong hour, a stranger looking in the refrigerator, a stranger checking Malik's medicine, a stranger deciding whether love counted if money was missing. Imani picked up her bag. Julian reached for his chair. Where are you going? To my son. I will handle this. No. I said I will handle this. No. I said I will handle it. And I said no. Julian stopped. Imani turned on him with a look so sharp, even Miriam stepped back. This is what you do not understand. You think handling it means calling a lawyer with a name people fear? You think it means making Elliot regret touching what belongs to you. He will regret it. Malik does not belong to you. The room went silent. Julian's mouth closed. Imani's hands were shaking now. She did not hide them. My son is not a territory. He is not a reason for you to feel powerful again. He is not a debt you get to pay off because you feel guilty that your family dragged him into this. Julian looked as if she had struck him. Maybe she had, not with cruelty, with truth. I did not mean it that way, he said. I know. That made it worse. Imani's voice dropped. You are not a bad man, Julian, but you are a man who has spent his life solving problems from above. My life is not below you. My child is not below you. If you help, you ask. If you protect, you do not own. If you give, you do not make me smaller, so you can feel generous. Miriam's eyes lowered. The sentence filled the room and stayed there. Julian sat in his chair with both hands on the armrests. For 11 years, people had spoken to him carefully. Doctors softened bad news. Lawyers polished theft. Family wrapped greed and concern. Even Miriam, who told him the truth more than most, chose the angle of the blade before she handed it over. Imani did not. She gave him the whole knife. Handle and edge. He looked down at his legs, then at the cane, then at the blue pouch Malik had left on the bench days ago. Miriam had placed it there again, without saying anything. Julian stared at it for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was different. Lower. Not weaker. Uncovered. You are right. Imani did not move. Julian swallowed. I wanted to fix it because I could not fix what was done to me. He looked up at her. I wanted to make one phone call and make your fear stop because I cannot make mine stop. There it was. Not a billionaire speaking. Not a chairman. A man. Miriam turned toward the window. Imani stayed where she was. Julian placed both hands on the wheels of his chair and moved closer. Not fast. Not commanding. Careful. When he reached her, he did something she did not expect. He did not offer money. He did not make a promise. He lowered himself. It was awkward, painful, dangerous. His right hand gripped the side of the therapy table. His left hand braced against the chair. His legs trembled before they even took weight. Julian, Miriam warned, do not help me. He shifted forward. The muscles in his thighs shook violently. His jaw clenched until a vein stood out near his temple. For one terrifying second, Imani thought he would fall again. But he did not. He lowered himself down until one knee touched the mat. Not smoothly, not like a proposal, not like a performance. Like a man choosing the floor because pride had kept him too high for too long. Imani's breath caught. Julian looked up at her from that broken half-kneel. One hand still gripping the table, the other pressed against his thigh. Pain had drained the color from his face. But his eyes were clear. I am sorry, he said. No decoration. No speech. No audience. I am sorry for thinking my money knew how to respect you. Imani's throat tightened. He continued, I am sorry for letting my family's war reach your child. His leg began to shake harder. Miriam moved, but Imani lifted one hand to stop her. Julian fought for another breath. And I am asking, not ordering, not buying, asking, how do I help without making you smaller? For a moment, Imani could not answer, because the question was simple and because no powerful person had ever asked it that way. Then she crouched in front of him, not beneath him, not above him, in front of him. You tell the truth, she said. His eyes held hers. All of it, yes. At the shareholder meeting, yes. You understand what that means? It means they will come for you harder. They already came for my son. Julian's face tightened. Imani reached for his arm. This time, helping was not taking. It was permission. Together, she and Miriam guided him back into the chair. He was shaking by the time he sat. Sweat darkened the collar of his shirt. His body had paid dearly for that apology. Imani saw it. So did he. Neither of them looked away. That evening, Imani returned to Belle's Wash and Fold just after 9. The laundromat was empty except for Miss Ruthie folding towels by the counter and Malik sitting at the back table with his homework open but unfinished. He looked up as soon as the bell rang. Too fast. He had been waiting. Imani crossed the room and pulled him into her arms. He was getting too old to be held like that in public. He let her anyway. Are we in trouble? He asked into her shirt. No, it was not completely true. It was not completely a lie. Miss Ruthie watched from the counter and said nothing. Malik pulled back. Did Mr. Julian stand again? Imani glanced at Miss Ruthie. Miss Ruthie lifted both eyebrows. Apparently Malik had not been pretending not to listen as well as he thought. He is trying, Imani said. Malik nodded seriously. Trying counts. Yes, she whispered. It does. That night, after Malik fell asleep, Imani found a folded piece of paper inside the blue pouch. At first, she thought it was his medication list. But the handwriting was different, messier. Written in a hurry. Mom, I am breathing okay. Help Mr. Julian stand. He looks sad when he thinks nobody sees. Love, Malik. Imani sat on the edge of her bed holding that note until her hand stopped shaking. Then she pressed it to her chest. In the garden district, Julian sat alone in the therapy room with a legal pad on his lap. Miriam stood at the door. The lawyers are on their way, she said. Good. The board packet will need proof beyond the medical files. We have Harlan's altered chart. We have the check. We need Elliot tying himself to both. Julian looked toward the cane. We will. How? Julian's expression changed. Not cruel, not cold, strategic. The man who had built a $3.8 billion empire had not disappeared. He had been waiting beneath pain. Elliot thinks the meeting is his burial ceremony for me, Julian said. So let him prepare the coffin. Miriam smiled faintly. And you? Julian touched the cane's silver handle. I will practice walking to it. For the next 6 days, the East Wing became a place of controlled suffering. Imani trained Julian like a man, preparing not for a miracle, but for testimony. There would be no dramatic leap, no effortless stride, no line pretty enough for cameras. If he stood in that shareholder meeting, he would stand as he was, in pain. Imperfect, unsteady, real. They measured the distance from the side entrance to the center aisle in the ballroom. 17 marble tiles. That was all. 17. The first day, he managed 4 with both hands on the bars. The second, 6 with the cane and Miriam's hand hovering at his elbow. The third, he fell at tile 5 and cursed so loudly a housekeeper crossed herself in the hallway. The fourth, he reached 11 and vomited from pain in a silver wastebasket that had probably cost more than Imani's rent. The fifth, he refused to stop at 12 until Imani stepped in front of him and said, "If you break yourself proving you are strong, Elliot wins." That stopped him. Not because he liked it, because it was true. On the 6th night, Julian reached 17. He stood at the end of the therapy room, one hand locked around the cane, shirt soaked through, legs shaking, face pale. Imani stood 3 feet away. Miriam stood behind him. No one touched him. For 1 full second, he was upright on his own. Then 2. Then 3. Julian looked at Imani. "You see me?" The question was so quiet, she almost did not hear it. She thought of Malik asking how much the pouch cost. She thought of Miss Ruthie saying she did not like being caught human. She thought of her grandmother's hands shining with oil in the evening light of a country Imani still carried in her bones. "Yes," Imani said. "I see you." Julian closed his eyes. Not long, just enough to let the words enter. The next morning, Julian Marchand sent the final board notice. Emergency shareholder meeting. Marchand Foundation Gala. 8 p.m. Agenda Item 1. Transfer of operational authority due to permanent incapacity. Imani read the notice on Miriam's phone while Malik's note rested folded in her pocket. Permanent incapacity. She almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because lies always sounded most confident right before they died. Julian sat beside the window with the silver cane across his lap. The blue pouch lay on the bench beside him. Power and breath. Both patched. Both waiting. He looked at Imani. "You do not have to be there." "Yes," she said. "I do. They will call you a fraud in front of everyone. They already called me one in private. They will question your license. I know. They will question your motherhood." Her face changed, but she did not step back. "Then I will stand there as Malik's mother." Julian's hand tightened on the cane. "And I will stand there as myself." Outside, the city moved toward evening. Inside the Marchand house, the old machinery of money, family, medicine, and betrayal prepared to close around Julian one final time. Elliot believed he was walking into a room to take power from a man trapped in a chair. He did not know Julian had counted the tiles. He did not know Imani had kept the check. He did not know Miriam had the original charts. And he did not know that a 9-year-old boy's note was folded inside Imani's pocket like a prayer. "Help Mr. Julian stand." The burial was scheduled for 8. The dead man was almost ready to walk in. At 7:23 that evening, the ballroom of the Meridian St. Charles looked like a place where lies had learned to wear perfume. Crystal chandeliers burned above white tablecloths. Gold-rimmed plates caught the light. Champagne moved through the room on silver trays. A string quartet played near the fountain, soft enough not to interrupt money talking to itself. On the far wall, beneath the Marchand Foundation crest, a banner read, "Restoring Identity, Tours Kerm." Imani Toussaint stood near the side entrance in worn-out navy scrubs and read those words twice. "Restoring dignity." She almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because the same family hosting a gala about dignity had sent a threat to her apartment door, questioned her motherhood, and tried to buy her silence with a check folded like mercy. Malik stood beside her in a clean white shirt Miss Ruthie had ironed at the laundromat. The blue pouch hung from his wrist. Imani had told him he did not have to come. He had answered with the quiet firmness that scared her most. I want to see what happens when people tell the truth. So Miss Ruthie came too. She wore a purple dress, silver earrings, and the expression of a woman who had entered richer rooms than this and found them no holier than bus stops. She kept one hand lightly on Malik's shoulder, not holding him back, holding the world away. Miriam Cole stood a few feet from them, dressed in black, a leather folder under one arm. Inside were the original medical records, the altered chart, the torn cashier's check, security footage from the mansion hallway, email printouts, transfer approvals, enough paper to make polite people uncomfortable. Julian was not with them. Not yet. He was in a private service corridor behind the ballroom, sitting in his wheelchair with the silver cane across his knees. His shirt was white. His suit was black. His face was pale. Pain had already started before the first step. That was the part no one in the ballroom would understand. They would see the moment. They would not see the cost. Imani had seen it. She had seen him vomit from nerve pain. She had seen his hands blister around the parallel bars. She had seen him collapse at tile 5 and hate himself for needing help. She had seen him make it to 17 and ask, so quietly she almost missed it, "You see me?" Now, behind the closed doors, Julian looked at those same doors like they led not into a ballroom, but into his own grave. Miriam stepped into the corridor. "They have started," she said. Julian nodded once. "How many?" "Board members, family voting members, donors, legal counsel, press from the business desk only. Elliot wanted witnesses. He got them." Julian looked at the cane. His thumb moved over the silver handle. "Where is Imani?" "Side entrance, with Malik and Miss Ruthie." His jaw tightened at Malik's name. Did they bother them? Miriam's mouth hardened. They tried. At 6:58, a young foundation assistant with a headset had approached Imani and said very softly that children with visible medical devices could create donor discomfort near the front tables. The sentence had barely finished before Miss Ruthie stepped forward. "Baby," she said, "the only discomfort in this room is going to come from the truth. You best go stand somewhere safe." The assistant had vanished. Miriam told Julian that part. For the first time all evening, he smiled. A small, real smile. "Remind me never to cross Miss Ruthie. She has already decided you're on probation." "Fair." Then the smile faded. From inside the ballroom, Julian Marchand's voice rose through the speakers. Warm, composed, practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, before we celebrate another year of the Marchand Foundation's work, the family must address a matter of stewardship." Julian closed his eyes. Stewardship. The final costume for theft. Inside the ballroom, Elliot stood at the podium beneath the crest, one hand resting near the microphone, the other tucked casually into his jacket pocket. He looked handsome, concerned, burdened by responsibility. All the things cameras loved. Dr. Pierce Harlan sat at the front table beside two family attorneys. His expression was grave. The board packet in front of him was already marked with tabs. Julian's relatives filled the first 3 tables. Some looked sad. Some looked eager. Most looked relieved. Relief was the cruelest one. Elliot glanced toward the empty space reserved for Julian's wheelchair. "Julian has carried this company for decades," he said. "No one in this room questions his brilliance, his sacrifice, or his legacy." Imani watched the guests nod. People loved praising someone right before taking from them. "But love also requires courage," Elliot continued. "It requires us to recognize when leadership must change to protect what generations built." Malik leaned closer to Imani. "He sounds like the insurance letters. Imani looked down at him. What? He says nice words when he means no. Miss Ruthie whispered. That boy hears too much. No, Imani said softly. He hears exactly enough. Elliot turned a page. As many of you know, Julian's condition has declined. His private physician, Dr. Pierce Harlan, has prepared an updated certification of permanent incapacity. Harlan stood. He buttoned his coat before walking to the podium. Everything about him was smooth. The hair, the voice, the lie. Mr. Marchand's spinal trauma remains irreversible, Harlan said. Recent unauthorized interventions by an unlicensed outside individual have caused concern, but no meaningful recovery has occurred. Imani felt the room shift toward her before anyone turned. That was how accusation worked. It made people search for a body to attach it to. Harlan continued. In fact, this individual appears to have encouraged false expectations in a vulnerable patient and gained inappropriate access to a medically complex household. Elliot did not look at her. He did not need to. The damage was moving. A woman at the front table whispered, "Is that her?" Another said, "In scrubs?" Someone else murmured, "How did she even get in?" Malik's hand found Imani's. She took it. Not because she needed comfort. Because he did. Maybe both. Elliot returned to the microphone. For legal reasons, we will not dwell on the conduct of Miss Toussaint tonight. Then he paused, just long enough for every person in the room to learn her name as Scandal. But we cannot allow emotional manipulation to endanger a family enterprise employing more than 12,000 people. Miss Ruthie muttered, "Lord, hold my earrings." Imani kept her eyes on Elliot. She would not look down. Not tonight. Elliot lifted the board resolution. The family therefore moves to transfer operational authority under Section 8C of the Marchand Family Trust, supported by 61% of voting members pending final execution. The attorneys began distributing signature pages. Pens appeared. Chairs shifted. The machinery started. Then the ballroom doors opened. Not the front doors. The side doors near the service corridor. The quartet stopped first. A single violin note hung in the air, thin and unfinished. Every head turned. Julian Marchand rolled into the ballroom in his carbon fiber wheelchair. For 1 second, the room seemed relieved. There he was, still seated, still manageable, still exactly where they expected him. Elliot recovered quickly. "Julian," he said, smiling with too many teeth. "We were told you were resting." Julian rolled forward without answering. The wheels made almost no sound over the polished floor. That silence had once made servants fear him. Now it made his family hold its breath. Miriam walked behind him. Imani remained near the side wall with Malik. The blue pouch was clutched in the boy's hand. Julian reached the center aisle and stopped. 17 marble tiles from the podium. He had counted them. Imani knew he had. Elliot stepped down from the stage. "This is not necessary." Julian looked at him. "No, that was your mistake." The room went still. Harlan moved toward Julian. "Julian, medically, I must advise." "You have advised enough." The words cut cleanly. Harlan stopped. Julian placed one hand on the left wheel, one on the right. Then he locked them. The click was small. The room heard it. Imani felt Malik's fingers tighten around hers. Julian lifted the cane from his lap. Slowly, carefully, not dramatically. He set its rubber tip on the marble floor. A sound so ordinary, it became thunder. Elliot's face changed. Not fully. Just enough. The first crack in the mask. "Julian," he said quietly, "do not do this." Julian looked up at him. "Why?" No one breathed. Julian's voice carried through the ballroom without a microphone. "Because I might fall?" Elliot said nothing. Julian leaned forward. His left hand gripped the cane. His right pressed against the chair. Pain crossed his face before his body moved. Sharp, visible, real. A few guests looked away. Imani did not. Miriam did not. Malik did not. Julian's shoulders trembled. His jaw tightened. His legs fought the floor. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then his weight shifted. His knees shook. His back bent forward. The cane wobbled. A woman gasped. Imani almost moved. She stopped herself. This was not hers to rescue. Not unless he asked. Julian pushed again. A sound came from him. Low and broken. Then, inch by inch, the man his family had buried rose from the wheelchair. Not gracefully. Not easily. Not like a miracle sold in a movie. He stood like pain had hands around his throat, and he had decided to breathe anyway. The ballroom froze. Elliot stepped back. Harlan's mouth opened, but no words came. Miriam's eyes filled, but she stood straight. Malik whispered, "He's doing it." Imani squeezed his hand. "Yes," she whispered. "He is." Julian stood for 3 seconds, then 5, then 8. His left leg shook violently. The cane took too much weight. His face had gone white. But he did not sit. He took one step. The room reacted like the floor itself had cracked. A sound moved through the guests. Not applause. Not yet. Shock. Raw and ugly. The kind people make when reality embarrasses them. Julian took another step. Then another. 17 tiles had become a continent. At tile 4, his right knee buckled. Miriam shifted behind him. He lifted one hand without turning. No. She stopped. At tile 7, sweat ran down the side of his face. At tile 10, Harlan backed away as if each step were evidence walking toward him. At tile 12, Elliot whispered something Imani could not hear. Maybe a curse. Maybe a prayer. At tile 17, Julian reached the podium. He placed the cane against it with a shaking hand. Then he turned toward the ballroom. The microphone caught his breath first. Hard, uneven, human. Then his voice. "For 11 years," Julian said, "I was told my body was finished. No one moved. I believed it because the people saying it wore white coats, carried family names, and spoke in the language of certainty." He looked at Harlan. Certainty is useful when the truth is inconvenient. Harlan's face drained. Julian opened the folder Miriam placed on the podium. His hands shook, but the pages were already marked. 6 months after my accident, my original rehabilitation team documented left plantar response under deep pressure. He lifted the page. 14 months after the accident, I reported heat sensation down my posterior thigh during assisted extension. Another page, 2 years after the accident. A voluntary contraction was suspected. The room murmured. Julian looked toward the front table. None of this was included in Dr. Harlan's current certification. Harlan stood. "This is a gross misinterpretation of." Julian's voice sharpened. "Sit down, Pierce." Harlan did not sit. Miriam stepped to the side screen and connected the tablet. A scan of the old report appeared behind Julian, then Harlan's new certification beside it. The contrast needed no explanation. Old report, incomplete injury, possible peripheral compression, new certification, irreversible central damage, permanent lower limb non-response. Words can murder possibility without leaving fingerprints. But tonight, the fingerprints were on the screen. Julian turned a page. 3 weeks ago, Ms. Imani Toussaint found what specialists stopped looking for. Every eye moved to Imani. She did not move. Malik stood beside her, blue pouch against his chest. Julian continued. She did not promise me a miracle. She did not ask me for power. She did not ask me for a share of anything in this room. He looked at Elliot. So my cousin sent her $50,000 to lie. Miriam tapped the screen again. The cashier's check appeared. Then the typed statement. Then the hallway image from Imani's apartment building, grainy but clear enough to show Elliot's private security contractor taping the envelope inside her door. A gasp moved through the family tables. Elliot's face hardened. That is fabricated. Julian nodded once. I hoped you would say that. Miriam brought up the next image. Bank transfer record. Marchand Operations Consulting Fund to the contractor. Authorized by Elliot Marchand. Timestamps 2 hours before the envelope appeared. Elliot turned toward Harlan. Harlan looked away. That betrayal was smaller than what they had done to Julian, but somehow uglier, because it happened so quickly. Julian gripped the podium. His legs were shaking now. Imani could see it from across the room. He had maybe 1 minute left, maybe less, but his voice held. There is more. A new document appeared. Emails. Harlan to Elliot. Subject line, RE, incapacity language. Harlan's words filled the screen. If recovery language remains in the file, the 8C transfer may be challenged. Another email. Elliot to Harlan. Then remove ambiguity. The ballroom changed. Not loud. Worse. Quiet. The kind of quiet that means every person understands they are inside history, and nobody wants to be seen standing on the wrong side of it. Julian looked at the family voting members. You were told I was declining. He looked at the board. You were told I could no longer execute judgment. He looked at the donors. You were told this foundation restores dignity. Then he looked at Imani. For a moment, his face softened. She did not give me my power back. His voice lowered. She reminded me I was abusing it by staying silent. Imani's eyes burned. She did not cry. Not because she was cold, because Malik was watching, and because some tears deserved privacy. Julian turned back to the room, effective immediately. Elliot Marchand is suspended as SUO pending an independent forensic audit. Elliot stepped forward. You do not have unilateral authority in your condition. Julian's hand closed around the microphone stand. My condition just walked 17 tiles to correct you. A sound broke through the room. Not laughter exactly. Not applause. A release. Then Julian continued. Dr. Pierce Harlan is removed from all Marchand medical contracts. Miriam Cole will deliver these records to the State Medical Board, the Family Trust Council, and federal investigators reviewing the Miami acquisition transfers. Harlan sat down. Not because he agreed, because his knees seemed to forget pride. Elliot looked around the room for allies. He found relatives suddenly fascinated by their plates. Attorneys whispering to one another. Board members closing folders. Donors pulling phones from handbags. The family had loved Julian's weakness when it made them feel safe. They did not know what to do with his witness. Julian's left leg trembled hard. The cane slipped half an inch. Imani moved before she could think. But Malik caught her wrist. He is asking with his eyes, Malik whispered. She looked at Julian. He was, not begging, not collapsing into command. Asking. Imani crossed the ballroom. Every head followed her. The woman they had called a fraud. The woman in worn-out scrubs. The woman whose hands had heard what money tried to silence. She reached the podium and stood beside him. Not behind, beside. May I? She asked softly. Julian nodded. Only then did she place one hand at his elbow, the other near his back. The room saw it. Permission. Respect. Not ownership. Not pity. Help. Julian leaned just enough to stay upright. Then he looked at Elliot one last time. You wanted me declared permanently incapacitated tonight. Elliot's face had gone gray. Julian's voice did not rise. It did not need to. I accept one part of that diagnosis. Something in this family has been incapacitated for a long time. He looked at the crest above the stage. Its conscience. No one clapped at first. The sentence was too heavy. Then Miss Ruthie did. One clap. Sharp. Alone. Another followed. Then another. Miriam. A board member. A server near the wall. A woman from the foundation staff. Then the room began to stand. Not all at once. Not everyone. Some remained seated because shame is heavy when it arrives late. But enough rose for the sound to fill the ballroom. Julian did not smile. Imani did not either. This was not victory yet. It was exposure. Victory would take warriors, hearings, audits, medical reviews, and long mornings of pain. Victory would take Malik sleeping without listening for his mother's fear. Victory would take Imani walking into rooms without having to prove her hands were clean. But for 1 minute, beneath the chandeliers of the Meridian St. Charles, the lie lost its voice. Julian lowered himself back into the wheelchair before his body failed him. Imani helped only as much as he allowed. When he sat, he was shaking so badly the cane rattled against the floor. Malik walked to him slowly. The blue pouch was in his hand. He stopped beside the wheelchair and held it out. Julian looked at it, then at the boy. "For luck?" Julian asked. Malik shook his head. "For breathing." Julian took the pouch with both hands, as if it weighed more than any document in the room. Maybe it did. Across the ballroom, Julian Marchand stood alone while two attorneys moved toward him. Dr. Harlan stared at the screen where his own words had become evidence. Miriam closed the leather folder. Miss Ruthie lifted her chin like a queen who had known the ending before the rich people caught up. And Imani Toussaint, who had entered that house for $7,500 because her son needed medicine, stood beside the man the world had called finished and understood something her grandmother had tried to tell her long ago. A hand that heals should never be afraid of power, not because power is kind, but because power, when touched by truth, can be made to kneel. 18 months later, Julian Marchand walked into St. Ray Agnes Community Rehab with a silver cane in his right hand and a blue cloth pouch folded inside his jacket pocket. He still limped. Some mornings, his left leg burned so badly he had to sit on the edge of the bed and remember how to breathe before he remembered how to stand. Some days the cane carried more of him than his pride liked to admit. But he walked, not like the portraits, not like the man his family used to advertise, like a man who had learned that healing was not returning to who you were before. Pain. Healing was telling the truth about what pain had changed, then choosing to live anyway. The old St. Agnes sign was gone. In its place, painted in deep blue letters above the door, was a new name: Toussaint Cole Neuro Recovery Center. Below it, in smaller letters, was the sentence Imani had almost refused to approve: "For bodies the world stopped listening to." Imani Toussaint stood inside the front room adjusting a therapy mat while Malik sat at the reception desk pretending to do homework and secretly watching everyone. He was taller now, still thin, still serious, but his breathing had changed. The new respiratory machine hummed at home beside his bed, quiet and steady. The emergency visits had slowed. The panic in Imani's face had softened, not disappeared. Mothers of sick children never completely stopped listening for danger, but Malik no longer asked how much every medicine cost before asking if it would help. That was a kind of miracle, too. Miriam Cole ran the clinic with the calm authority of someone who had spent a lifetime keeping people alive and had finally found a room where care did not have to ask permission for money. On the wall behind her desk hung two framed documents. One was Imani's Advanced Neuro Rehab Certification. The other was the first public grant from the Blue Pouch Fund. Julian had tried to name it after Imani. She said no before he finished the sentence. He tried to name it after Malik. Malik said that sounded embarrassing, so the fund took the name of the small repaired pouch that had once held a child's inhaler beside a billionaire's silver cane. The Blue Pouch Fund paid for rehab devices, respiratory equipment, transportation, and home modifications for children of single mothers across Louisiana. Not as charity, as correction. Julian insisted on that word, correction, because charity made powerful people feel generous. Correction made them remember who had been denied. Julian Marchand was gone from the company before winter. The forensic audit uncovered enough hidden transfers, altered approvals, and Miami acquisition irregularities to keep attorneys busy for years. Dr. Pierce Harlan lost his Marchand contracts first. Then his medical board review became public. Julian never celebrated either downfall. When asked about revenge, he only said, "Truth did not need me to enjoy it." Miss Ruthie Bell became the first unofficial board member of the fund, though she claimed she only came to meetings for the pastries. Her laundromat got a new roof, new machines, and a permanent sign above the folding table where Malik used to do homework. "If the pot is empty, knock." Every Friday, Someone left prepaid laundry cards at the counter for families who needed them. Miss Ruthie pretended not to know who paid. Everyone pretended to believe her. On the clinic's opening day, Julian found Imani in the therapy room after the crowd left. She was standing beside the parallel bars, looking at the floor. 17 tiles? He asked. She smiled. 17. He looked down. The same number had been marked subtly into the clinic floor, not with marble this time, but with small brass circles. A private map of an impossible walk. Julian reached into his jacket and took out the blue pouch. The stitches were still there. White thread. Uneven. Strong. Malik said I could borrow it for speeches, he said. Imani took it carefully. No, he said you could borrow it if you got scared. Julian looked toward the waiting room, where Malik was laughing at something Miss Ruthie had said. Then he looked back at Imani. I still get scared. So do we. For a moment, neither of them moved. No ballroom. No cameras. No family name. Just two people who had both been asked to carry more than one body should hold. Then Imani placed the pouch back in Julian's hand. Then keep breathing. Julian closed his fingers around it. And for the first time in 11 years, the billionaire did not feel powerful because people feared losing him. He felt powerful because someone had trusted him enough to stand beside him when he was shaking. So tell me, if you were Imani, after everything Julian's family did to her and her son, would you have trusted him again? Or would you have walked away? This story is a work of fiction. Names, characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents are either the products of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.